It's time to go over the fantasy football recap for the Buffalo Bills. In this video, we're going to go over all of the fantasy relevant players for this team in 2022. Let's start at the quarterback position with Josh Allen. He had 567 attempts for 63.3% of his completion that ended up for 4,283 yards and 35 touchdowns, along with 14 interceptions. His passing yards ended up being 7th in the league in the 16 games that he did play. He also added another 124 rushes for 762 yards and 7 touchdowns, which ended up being 3rd amongst all quarterbacks in the 16 games he played this year. Josh Allen was a major part of the success of the Buffalo Bills. He continued to have success with Stefon Diggs. He ended up connecting with Gabe Davis. He actually had a good running game this year with Devin Singletary. And it all came about to be one of the best teams in the AFC, and they're making a strong push in the playoffs as we speak. The Buffalo Bills have everything what it takes. If you end up drafting Josh Allen, you know you have a set it and forget it type of quarterback. Week in and week out, you can depend on him to be solid for your fantasy team. Now let's switch over to the running back position and talk about Devin Singletary. Singletary had another solid fantasy football season. He dominated the running back snaps with 65% of those snaps, with the closest running backs to him was James Cook at 24%. He ended up with 177 rushes for 819 yards and 5 touchdowns. That ended up landing him at 25th overall among running backs in 16 games. He added in 38 receptions for 280 yards and a touchdown. The receiving yards ended up being 22nd in the 16 games that he did play. Even with the way that Singletary played this season, I do see more of a balanced tack next year with Singletary and James Cook together. James Cook should slowly but surely start to be the man. I don't know if it's going to be next season or maybe the year after that, but Devin Singletary definitely showed fantasy owners and the Buffalo Bills that he could be a competent running back in a solid team like the Buffalo Bills. Speaking of James Cook, let's go ahead and go to him next. Cook really wasn't given much of an opportunity this season, with only having about 3 solid games. He ended up with 89 rushes for 507 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he had 21 receptions for 180 yards and a touchdown. I see next year being much better for Cook as his opportunity gets even better with this team. I think having the pedigree of his brother being Dalvin Cook, he's got it in him. He knows he could be a good running back. I think he's starting to show it towards the end of this season, and slowly but surely you should probably start seeing him become the main ball carrier for this team. But seeing how Devin Singletary did play this season, it's probably going to fend off James Cook a little bit, at least early part of next season. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season you see James Cook really start to become the prominent running back in this offense. Moving along to the wide receivers, we're going to go ahead and start talking about Stefon Diggs. Diggs was yet again the main man for Josh Allen this season, someone who has considered a safety blanket just due to his solid hands and receiving abilities. Diggs continued to be a top fantasy target and a first-round pick in every single league. He ended up this season with 108 receptions for 1,429 yards and 11 touchdowns, which put him at 5th overall amongst all wide receivers in the 16 games that he played. Diggs did receive 76% of the wide receiver snaps on this team. He is the main go-to guy on this offense. It doesn't matter who they have up there, if Gabe Davis is having a good season or not. Stefon Diggs is going to prove why he is at the top wideout, not only on this team, but in the NFL. He's somebody you can depend on, somebody you can draft towards the end of the first round, early second round, and you know you got yourself a prime number 1 wide receiver for your fantasy team. Another wide receiver we can talk about is Gabe Davis. Davis turned out his best performing season in his young career. He went from averaging 60 targets in his first 2 seasons to 93 targets this season. He finished with 48 receptions for 836 yards and 7 touchdowns, which placed him 30th in the 15 games that he played this year. Davis was on the field more than any other wide receiver this season for this team, as he received 84% of the wide receiver snaps. Now, I know a lot of people are looking for Gabe Davis to take a huge leap this season, just depending on how he played in the playoffs last season. He didn't quite take that kind of step. I know a lot of people may have been disappointed because they were just thinking he was going to be something really special, but he was a good wide receiver this season. He was just over expected to do what he probably wasn't going to do in the first place, especially when you have somebody like Stefon Diggs on the other side of the field. Overall, I think he did have a good season for you. If you drafted him, hopefully you didn't draft him too high, but if you got him towards the middle rounds, towards the late rounds, I'm pretty sure you're happy with the production he was able to give you. Now, the last receiver that I'm going to talk about on this team is going to be Isaiah McKenzie. I consider McKenzie this season as kind of a flash in the pan. I remember one week where he almost had 100 yards receiving, and other than that, he was really a non-factor. He had 42 receptions for 423 yards and 4 touchdowns. Other than that, Isaiah McKenzie was kind of like a one-week wonder. I know a lot of people have said, hey, look, go to the waiver wire, pick this guy up. He's going to be the guy you want on your team, but he never really panned out after that. So other than that one game, that's all he really gave you, and nobody really drafted this guy anyway, so that's okay. Now onto the tight end. Let's go ahead and go over Dawson Knox. What a massive disappointment this guy was. I mean, I called it before the season. You can go back and view the tape. I started and tell you guys, hey, look, Dawson Knox, he's going to be a bust. He was way too touchdown dependent last year, and he can't really repeat that type of production. In this season, he ended up with 48 receptions for 517 yards and 6 touchdowns. That ended up hitting 14th in overall in tight ends in the 15 games that he played. But if you guys listened to me in the offseason, I told you guys don't draft this guy. I know a lot of people overdrafted him. He probably middle to a little bit later than middle in the rounds, and he's not worth it. I mean, I wouldn't even have drafted him this season. I know he ended up at 14th, but he wasn't even a tight end one, somebody you could depend on week in and week out. He just wasn't worth it. He was definitely a bust. In summary, I'm going to go over my passes and my fails for the Bills in 2022. I'd say Josh Allen is a pass. Devin Singletary is a pass. James Cook is a fail. Stephon Diggs is a pass. Gabe Davis is a pass. Isaiah McKenzie is a fail. And Dawson Knox is a fail. Look, I appreciate all you guys watching the video. If you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button for me, I'd really appreciate it. It goes a long way. We're going to be putting out all types of videos here. And if you guys want to see anything about the Baltimore Ravens fantasy recap, just click here. Click it. I'd appreciate it. See you guys next time.